let me tell you a little bit of what this is about, because I think I informed you a little bit before, but I'll just fill you in. So this is an interview with men to try to understand, to help women understand what men really want.
Yeah.
Right? So it's what men really want, honest conversations with quality men like yourself.
Thank you.
And it's to, basically, a lot of women are confused. Obviously, it's confusing out there to date these days. And with the advent of things like Tinder, it's become even more confusing and even more a mishmash of what men actually want, what they expect, and what will keep their attention span going. So that's what I'm trying to figure out from the men that I'm interviewing. Basically, what do they really want? Like, what kind of woman would make them interested? What kind of woman would make them approach? What kind of woman would make them close the deal? You know, what are they interested in long term? Things like that. And I'm going to ask you questions like that, but also questions about, like, why do men do that? That's something that...
Okay.
So the first thing I want to ask you is, what actually would make you cross the room to talk to a woman? Let's say you're in a cafe, like Starbucks or something like that. What would make you talk to a woman there?
I think, first of all, without any question, it's definitely a physical attraction. But, I mean, I think women should be wary of men saying physical attraction, because physical attraction can be good for one and not good for another. Yeah? Okay. In other words, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Yeah?
Okay, explain that then.
Well, I mean, I honestly do believe that it doesn't matter how a woman. I hear it said that men like slim women, men like women that look like or that do certain things. I don't agree with that at all. I think that women can get very confused. I would imagine women could get very confused over trying to match a criteria that some men say they like, but certainly can't be generalized over all men. Okay. So I think what you do, Julia, is excellent in as much as you provide an opportunity for women to simply go out in non-threatening environments to meet people, and it's through that process that people can be found attractive. I mean, looking across a room, great if that happens, but it very rarely happens, let's face facts. I mean, it's not a question of that a man's out looking all the time and suddenly he sees somebody across a room and introduces himself. Right.
How does it work?
Well, very often it's that the man is introduced in a social group to an individual. There isn't necessarily... There may be an attraction there, but there isn't necessarily an attraction there at that stage. And then they both get to know and like something about each other. And then I suppose really what I'm trying to say is they become friendly first. Yeah. And then embark eventually on perhaps a relationship. Okay. Now, that's where men are looking for a relationship and where women are looking for a relationship. Okay. However, there could be simply friendship. And that's just as valuable in many cases. So I cringe when I hear that women believe that men are looking for a particular type. That may be the case for those individual men, but it certainly can't be generalized over everybody. Okay, well, just to ask you about you then, what kind of woman do you find attractive that you would actually approach? Like, let's say there was no introduction. Let's say you just were left to your own devices. What type of woman would you approach? I think friendliness is really key. Okay. Somebody who is quite friendly, who enjoys to talk, who likes to get in conversation, because, you know, quite honestly, some men don't like getting into conversation with women because they don't have a lot of confidence and they're not quite sure what to do in terms of how to continue the conversation, and vice versa, the same for some women. So what kind of women would you anticipate being friendly before you even spoke to them? Is there something you do to open the conversation to test how friendly they are? Or how would you know if someone's friendly and approachable? It's a very good question, because it's not something I'm conscious of. I think it's something you're unconscious of. Okay. You unconsciously find an attraction. Now, you unconsciously also know whether that attraction has been reciprocated. And in that case, then it's quite feasible to approach an individual and get to talk to them and get to know them a little bit. I mean, but there's also the fact that men may not necessarily be out for a relationship. They may be players, for want of a better word, and that's a different scenario completely. But where relationships are concerned, then it's definitely, in my view, the friendship first. And things will start to work from that point.
Okay, so explain as far as like let's go back to looks, because you're not the only man that said looks is the first thing. What exactly?
Hold on, I didn't say looks is the first thing.
Okay.
No, I said that there may be an attraction, whatever that is. Now, looks, a definition of look can be very different from one man to the next.
Is there one kind
or from one woman to the next?
Is there anything as far as the way she looks that is an instant turn off? Let's say.
Well, I mean, honestly, I think if you walk down Oxford Street and look at the couples together, they're all manner of sorts of couples. Okay. So there's big ones, small ones, short ones, fat ones, thin ones. Some dressed immaculately, some dressed really scruffily, but yet they're together. So that's why I said earlier that really beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But I think that it's much more important to be introduced in some form of a social setting, and in that social setting to then not be labelled as dating or not be labelled as looking for someone, but simply get to know someone. And the more a woman, or a man for that matter, gets exposure to the opposite sex if they're looking for a relationship, then the more opportunity they have to find someone, which is why I think it's so important what you do. Because you do provide the opportunity for women to meet in non-threatening social settings, and you do introduce women to people that you know, and that helps, I'm sure.
Can I ask you, so let's say you're introduced to a different woman, okay? How would you decide? Let's say you kind of make a decision instantly, I think. And that's the whole idea of speed dating.
You think, do you? You mean you think I do?
No, I mean, I think in general people make a decision pretty quickly. I mean, some people may take longer, but I think in general people make a decision pretty quickly. And that's the whole idea behind a lot of dating events out there right now, where they kind of do a rotation, where you meet different people and you get to, kind of spend time talking to them, but you also have that instant, I like her, I like him. What would make you friend zone a woman versus, I want to get her to know her better on a more romantic basis?
Good question. I think it works both ways again. I think that you can have a friendship, and a friendship is a very different dynamic than a conversation that could lead to a relationship. There's more of a closeness, there's more of an interaction.
But when you decide you're having a friendship, you're deciding, okay, I'm not hitting on this woman, I'm just going to have a friendship with her.
No, I don't think you decide that originally. Okay. I think that you might be talking to somebody that maybe you've met for the first time, that you like talking to them. They're quite talkative, they're quite responsive, and you're getting on well. But then there is that magic element.
Yeah, okay, explain that magic element. That's what I want to know. That's what I'm trying to pinpoint. That's the magic element that says, I want her. What is that magic element?
Truthfully, you're asking me to describe something that I have failed miserably at many times.
Yeah, it's true. That might be true.
And I'm not really sure that I could describe what that magic element is.
Well, okay, tell me of the women that you feel that for. Describe them a bit. What are they like? That would be a good way of doing it. Because I know it's very difficult to isolate that magic element. You're not the first person that said, well, I don't understand, it's just something, it's chemistry, it's just something in the air, I don't know, but something. There's something that some women do right, and some women do wrong. It doesn't have to do with looks.
I don't think, let me just be clear, women do not do, in my view, women do not do things right or wrong, They can be told that things are wrong, but I would strongly disagree with that.
Well, you're very kind, but there is definitely some women who seem to draw lots of admiring men, and some women who, they might even be more beautiful, seem to have very few of those admiring men, or at least very few that stick around for a long time, let's say. I mean, I'm familiar with both types of these kind of women. This is like, I'm making a study of this. And this is what, the purpose of this is kind of for. I want to isolate those components, that the women who manage to have loads of admirers, or men that are just like, I really want to get to know her better.
Oh, I think if a woman shows interest in talking to an individual chap, that can help the individual chap to open up. I mean, I'm a very gregarious guy. I like to feel that I can talk to anybody, but I certainly have been in positions where I have found it quite difficult to talk to someone.
Okay, so her being a good talker.
Good
conversationalist.
In a situation, in a scenario where I choose not to talk to anybody. I might just have a few drinks and then go again.
Right.
You know, so.
But when is she? So one of the things that makes her more likely to be admired, you're saying, is that she shows interest.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be physical interest in the individual, but interest in creating a conversation, interest in associating with someone that they know are probably there for the same reason as them and just need to feel a little better.
So she's inquisitive, asking questions, showing interest in you, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of the process of engaging in a rapportful relationship. So they're building a closeness, albeit through just communicating at a very basic level with one another. It's at that point, I think, that relationships can either spark into friendship or an emotional relationship.
Okay, so this is where I want to differentiate. So there's something that some women do that gets them a lot of male friends that like spending time with them, but they don't want to romantically be with them. And there's something that other women do that gets them a lot of male friends who want a romantic relationship with them, or maybe more than friends. You know, that's what I wanted. You know, women are wondering, what is that something? That's what I want to isolate. So what is that something? I mean, can you, as much as you can, describe what, let's say, if you imagine a couple of women that you have been attracted to in that way, what did they do that makes you think attraction for them? You know, can you slightly isolate those components?
I think probably in my case, quite friendly. In my case, very light-hearted.
What does that mean?
Well, within the context of not a serious conversation about politics or about religion or about something like that, but more of an interest in the individual. Who are you? Where do you come from? What do you do? How are things? I mean, there's the very famous forming scenario in relationships, and it's about family, for instance. Organization, work environment. Or relationships, I'm not sure now about what M means. I didn't know at one time, but it might be marital relationship or marital status. But if you work your way through it, it's called forming.
And if you I and G.
Well, it's a form,
forming, starting. Okay, right.
Well, no, but it's just forming relationships, and it's based on that scenario, and. You know, there's a lot of conversation can take place about family, about friends, about relationships that can really get two people intertwined in one another's lives in a way that starts to build a bond, Whereas if that's not discussed, if that's not interested, then I find it's very difficult to come to terms with a relationship with anybody.
Oh, okay, so getting personal is a good thing.
I think providing the other party wants to get a little personal, I think it's very obvious that you don't get too personal too quickly. You know, people have their own counsel to keep, but when they feel comfortable with you and they start to maybe engage more on a personal level, then I think probably that's when it could lead more to a relationship rather than just a friendship.
Okay, so talking about getting personal, are there any discussion topics that are off limits that would make you feel like they're getting too personal?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, sex for one.
Okay, so people shouldn't talk about sex?
Well, no, I'm not saying that they shouldn't, if both decide they want to, but I'd certainly think that the guy shouldn't take the lead in something like that.
Okay, but the woman can?
And if it's appropriate, the guy may follow, but if not, then drop it.
Okay, because there's a lot of women that have these, they have these dates, they think it's a great date, and then they come back, he's never contacted her again. And they're just like, I don't know what happened, what did I do, what did I say, I thought it was a great date, we had so much fun, blah, 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 but he just
I think heavy emotion, forget it.
Okay.
In my experience,
I would say most people won't make that mistake of getting too emotional.
I would say most people wouldn't, but some people do.
Okay.
And that is a turn off, both for women and for men, you know.
Okay, so basically being too angry, being too bitter, being too sad, being too whatever.
Exactly. I mean, you're there to have a nice, interesting conversation with somebody in a light-hearted way that may end up with a relationship or even just a good friendship.
Okay.
And I think that some men and women make the mistake of thinking there has to be an either or, a relationship or not. Very often there can be a very positive friendship that's a very great support to both parties, if they are willing to explore that option as well.
Okay, but what else is an instant turn off in a date scenario?
I think it's quite simple, and that is that both parties need to be heard. So listening is essential.
Okay.
Yeah.
So her constantly chattering on without asking him questions is definitely a bad thing.
Well, but I mean, simply observe the person you're talking to. Pace them a little bit. In other words, be interested, nod your head, let them know with your eyes and your body language that you're quite interested in their conversation, but don't interrupt them mid-flow, because it's probably the only time they've had an opportunity to get out what they want to say. And then you'll find it's very simple, because they'll come to the end of the conversation and then you can interject and say your bit. Now that applies to men as well as women.
Is there anything else that you would say is like an instant turn off?
I talked yesterday to a guy about this, and he said to me, which I haven't experienced, nor would I have thought about, but he said to me, personal hygiene.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is interesting, actually, because I've never come across that as a problem. He said that, no, well, I mean, it's, in that particular instance, I'm sure it was quite serious for the lady concerned, but it was about body odour, and it was about not being hygienic, in that way, just in general body, I suppose, body protection, spraying, whatever. Yeah. That's not something I've ever come across, but he did say that he found that with several of his friends when I told him that you and I were going to meet together. And he said, that's one. Make sure you say that.
Is there anything that she says that is a turn off? I mean, like, do you know what I mean? It depends on what you're looking for, but is there anything she said, like if she gives you hints that you're not in her league, or that she's going to be expensive, or that she's a little bit of a princess, do you know what I mean? Things like that.
I think you've got to be at least open to, there can be another thing, there can be a sexual relationship, there can be a friendship, and there can be an emotional relationship, yeah? But there can also be no relationship at all. Right. And I think both parties have to be aware that that can be the case. Now, I've read somewhere that 70% of initial contacts will not result in any sort of relationship at all.
Okay.
There will simply be nice interactions between two people that'll come to nothing. But yet both parties may have liked for that moment in time to be talking to the other party.
Okay.
Now, the next part of it was that of the percentage left, half of that will get misconstrued as to the signals that are being sent.
Okay.
So one might think there's a sexual relationship, the other might think there's an emotional relationship, and vice versa, or they might think there's nothing at all but a friendship. Yeah. Now, at that point, I think it's very adult for two people who have an interest in each other to clarify exactly what that is. Friendship or potential relationship, friendship first and into the future, potential relationship. So the other person knows where they're coming from, because it's pointless one or the other pursuing an emotional relationship by misreading signs, but yet the other person wanting a friendship. Yeah? Mm-hmm. They could end up losing everything.
When you said emotional relationship, do you mean like a romantic relationship?
Yeah, a romantic relationship.
So now tell me, differentiate between romantic versus sexual.
Well, I mean...
What happens in a guy's point of mind when he's thinking she's one versus the other? I imagine romantic means sexual and romantic, whereas sexual means just sexual.
Yes. I mean, one is for the, not the purposes of reproduction, if I put it that way.
Right.
And the other one is more intimate, more long-term, more togetherness.
When does a guy decide that? How soon?
Very different for every guy, I would imagine.
Okay.
But for a guy for somebody like me to get involved with somebody, and as you know, I'm currently not at the moment, but that's absolute choice. The issue has to be friendship first. It can grow quite fast after that, but it starts with friendship first, and that's what I feel is most suitable in my circumstances. But
so you start with
I can't speak for every guy.
You start with friendship, and from friendship you'll go to, if you fancy her, you'll go to either sexual or emotional, or let's say romantic.
Romantic, yeah, so romantic. I mean,
is it friendship to romantic, and sexual kind of starts on its own, right, separately? Or is it, friendship to either sexual or romantic?
I'm sure you're aware that there are males you'll meet and you're not physically attracted to those males. There are other males that you will meet and perhaps you're physically attracted to them, but you're not interested in any romance, and it may or may not happen. Then there are individuals that you'll meet and actually quite like to spend some time around them, and that starts to flourish into a more romantic long-term relationship.
Okay. What kind of woman could you imagine? What would you be looking for, could you imagine, in order to have a relationship with somebody?
Oh, that's a very strange question. What would I be looking for?
What would she be like, let's say?
Like in what way?
Every way. Whatever you want to give me.
I can honestly say that I've seen a lot of appeal in many different relationships that I've had over the years, and there has been something very, very special about any long-term relationship I've ever been involved in.
Okay, so what was the thing that made you have a long-term relationship with those women versus other women that you don't have a long-term relationship with? What do those women have? What qualities?
Well, when we say those women, we're not talking about a lot of women that I've been involved with in very long-term relationships. But I certainly think that there was, without question, an absolute love on both sides, meaning that they were there for the other person. When that didn't work out, in my case, after a while, I believe a lot of that was down to me being immature at that stage about
so is that
what a relationship
loyalty?
means.
Would you consider that loyalty?
It's more than loyalty. It's about being there for the other person.
Okay.
Let me just say, being there for the other person mentally. I wasn't there for the other person a lot of the time that I'm thinking of in my head now. That was the longest relationship I've had, which is probably why it, or at least contributed to why it ended some years ago. But there was definitely, if I had to live again, would I do it all over again? I did it all for the right reasons. We literally were two different people after a while, and that's why.
So is that compatibility of being the same, similar, that you grow similarly, is that important?
I think very much so. I think there has to be a closeness of mentality. A closeness of mentality, what I mean by that is quite apart from just the two of you, but what the two of you want to do and mutual support for each other in doing what you want to do. I don't think I provided that in my longest term relationship. Now, with hindsight looking back, although I would have said I did at the time. So now, with the benefit of hindsight and looking back, I can see the flaws that I had that I would hope would not resurface again in any way, because I've now got that experience, so I now know, possibly what I'm trying to look for. But having said that, there is a there is a negotiating space between everybody where they have to find common ground, they have to trade off things they want to be in this relationship. And I think it's the acceptability that can happen between two people that will take it forward. You know, I met an old couple once and they told me that they'd never rowed in their life. They disagreed, but they'd never rowed, and they were married for 60 years.
Wow.
Now, in that case, they lived for one another, and they were quite open about that. They lived for one another. You know, every day they got up, it was fantastic because they were together. You know, it would be fantastic if everybody could find somebody like that.
Yeah, that's very
but, you know, that's maybe the ideal. But certainly, I don't think we can generalise about what men want necessarily. There are certain things that certain men want. But I think women shouldn't be given the idea that if they're not a certain way, that men won't like them. I think that's rubbish.
Yeah, no, it's not about that. It's about how do we keep their individuality but help them be better in their relationships with men, in their interactions with men, let's say. Even when they meet men initially.
I think stay away from heavy emotion initially. You know, real detail. Do a lot of listening, which is what I didn't do in the past. Listen, 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 listen. And with body language, just as you're doing now, indicate interest and indicate that you understand. And then when they come to a natural conclusion or natural pause in whatever they're talking about, and you formed an opinion, then interject with perhaps maybe a question about how interesting it is what they're talking about, and could they tell you a little bit more, without getting into any major personal detail. Be aware that relationships can be one of four things. They can be sexual, but they can be friendship, they can be relationship, in fact three things. They can be relationship, or they can be nothing at all. Yeah.
Okay.
And you should be prepared to accept any one of those outcomes.
So let's say the woman goes out with a man. She thinks they had a great date, but the man never contacts her again. If he doesn't contact her, is there anything she can do to turn that around, or is that like he just wrote her off?
If a man doesn't contact her, I would leave it.
Okay.
I would completely drop it. Now, listen, he could have lost his phone, he might have lost her number, in which case fate will find a way to bring them back together again, and in which case he can tell the other party what happened. But if a man just doesn't contact you, well, he's not interested.
Could she turn that around in any way? Meaning like make a joke or somehow like say something humorous, you know what I mean? Something to kind of make him be like, maybe I should be considered.
I think she should just get on with her life. I think the worst things you could do is start to run after the other individual, and try and create ways of pulling somebody back again. I think by not doing that, she stands a much better chance of getting somebody interested, if they have a glimmer of interest in the first place, than the other way around. Because no, if he doesn't phone, if he doesn't call you back, drop it. If something happened so he couldn't call you back, you'll find out in time, and then you can work out if you want to move forward from that point. But I think it's very straightforward. And I mean, look, I've got to say, I know this is about what men want, but, you know, what women want, but men, exactly the same. You know, if a woman isn't calling you back, and you have, you know, you think it was a great date, and you think everything was fine, you've got to be mature enough to say, look, I really enjoyed the time with you tonight, I'd like to see you again, would you like to, you know, shall we arrange another date?
Okay, so if he doesn't do that, could she do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite permissible for adults to do that. If one person thinks it's surreal because the other person's done this and they feel awkward because of it, well, so what? I mean, whichever party feels awkward will find out very quickly if the other person wants to see them again. So don't call back, but do ask. Don't
call back meaning if she calls.
Sorry. Don't run after somebody who's not calling you back. But do ask. You know, do say, you know, this is what I'm interested in. I would like to see you again, if you want to see them again, for friendship, stroke, potential relationship. And if it's the other way, you know, it's quite permissible to politely make that clear as well, so that the other party is very aware of the other's position. And then, you know, a friendship may ensue out of that. A friendship, period.
Now, what if the man is very complimentary about the woman, or the woman's assets, let's say, but doesn't follow through with asking her for another date? What does that mean?
Well, I think that he really enjoys the company. There's a potential for a friendship. But if he's not asking for another date, he either hasn't the confidence to, or he isn't interested. Now, how do you work out which one is which? I think that can take a third party. I've been in a position in about a year ago where a girl friend of mine, just purely a friend, and I were out for a drink, and this really lovely chap was standing at the table beside us, because there was no seats, there was tables. He stood at the table, and it was obvious to me that he might be interested in my friend, and I discussed it with her, and she thought he was a nice bloke, but he was just too shy. Now, he did speak to her, and he did speak to her about general stuff, you know, how are you enjoying tonight? And I could tell by looking at him that he was really interested, but he just didn't have enough to take it further in terms of asking her. So I walked over and pulled him to one side and said, look, whatever you want to do here, she's interested in you. So if you're interested in her, talk to her on that basis, so you both know that you both are interested. And because I told her I was going to do this, and she was quite happy for me to do that, because she had to know. And she wasn't going to ask. She was the woman in this scenario, so she wasn't going to ask. She could have asked, but she wasn't going to ask. And I believe that they've now been together nearly 9 months.
Wow,
and
amazing.
He's probably 7 years older than her. You know, I think she was 31 and he was 39 or 40 or something like that. But it's interesting because that now is a very positive relationship, and they're very good for each other.
Right.
And it may turn out to be a marriage in the future. I mean, it's looking that way. Nobody's proposed yet or anything, but they're stuck together at the hip. They're always together.
Okay, so he was just shy and he wouldn't have done anything. Yeah,
so it's important, I think, what you do, because you can pick up those sorts of things with the women that work with you, and perhaps could maybe make that final connection where you can see the sparks there because you're an experienced lady, but it's just not happening with either party.